beside me. He's ducked down behind me. Yeah.
I'm this small.
I love doing that.
Jeffrey stands out in the crowd because he's got that mechanical arm, and he wrote a book called I Give My Right Arm, which he...
Wonderful title.
It is. That's right.
Thank you.
I always said I'd give my right and left arm to be ambidextrous. But anyway, he gave me the book to read, and it's a really good read about how he got involved. He'll explain. But how, like a lot of teenagers, he did drugs as a teenager, and how that led him down a really bad path, as it always does. It never leads to a good path. But thank God for the grace of Jesus.
Amen.
And so let's all give a nice round of applause tonight for Jeffrey Dale Wapp. And the book will be available after we talk tonight.
Thank you. My name is, like the pastor says, Jeffrey Dale Wapp, and I went down the wrong path in life. And I was led back in the 60s with all the hippies and that, and thinking that drugs are all right, and that our bodies are our own, and so we can do whatever we want with them. And so I got involved with smoking pot. Started out doing that. But like I say, I wrote the book, but I guarantee you that nothing good has come from drug use. And like, I know somebody now who's rather close to me who's involved with it, and I don't care who you are. If you do it, it gets in your system, and it's going to be in there for a couple of days, and it's going to be affecting you. If you have psychological problems, it's going to cause problems in your life. But some people say, no, it has not caused me any problems at all. But that's not the truth. Marijuana, for one thing. I mean, they legalized it, and I'm glad it's not being, people aren't going to prison for it anymore. But the problem is that there's a generation that thinks it's okay. And then it's impacting, like, the young kids. They don't understand that it gets into the lungs, and and it diffuses throughout the day for, say, 48 hours until it's out of your system, and it's affecting you. During the course of when I was a teenager and throughout my life, I never accomplished one thing when I was using marijuana. I mean, it feels good, for the first few minutes, but you're going to sleep a lot. You're going to have memory problems. I remember in my the first time that I went into rehab, I spent 30 days in the hospital.
Wow.
And that was after a problem that I had. The first time that I got caught, and I cooperated with the police. But when I got out of the hospital after 30 days, I couldn't believe the difference of who I was. I stopped saying, after everything. I mean, it's constantly, I mean, and the problems that I had with in communication. When I was using marijuana, I wasn't very responsive. I wasn't an immediate response in conversation.
Hey Jeffrey, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and about your home, your parents, and your teenage years, if you would.
Yeah. I had basically, I guess my first 14 years of my life were described as Jeff in Wonderland. We had everything that you could want. But the problem is like within 1 year of trying drugs, I dropped out of school. And that's certainly the case in every soul's life that tries drugs. Basically, successful at school, involved in lots of activities, but as soon as they smoke marijuana, within a year, the individual self-destructs, and you can't recognize them anymore. And it happens over and over and over again. Now, the main reason why I'm here today is because of the opioid epidemic in this country. And I'd like to start like a slogan, which is remember the 49,000. Because that's how many people between the ages of 18 and 24 last year died.
Wow. That's young.
From opioids.
That's young.
And that's from overdoses. 49,000. And you'd almost think that it's a conspiracy against our country. Because who's dying? It's the youth. It's the cream of the crop of American society. It's the future doctors, the future scientists, the future authors are dying before they even get a chance. This is America. This is in just in 4 years it'll be 200,000 of our youth are gone.
All that waste.
That's such a waste. Like I say, if you think of if a foreign power was trying to take us out, that's what they do.
Right.
Is they take out our young, and that's what they're doing. It's a total. It could be a conspiracy because they're manufacturing fentanyl in maximum amounts now, and they're bringing it into this country. And when I first began using heroin years ago, it was basically heroin. And it was, say, 15% of the package would be pure heroin, the rest would be a cut. And you can't believe what it's down to now. It's just 2% heroin, and the rest is fentanyl.
Wow.
They've actually cut it down from 15% down to 2%. And these dealers don't give a darn if they're killing the youth. They want to make that money. And it's, believe it or not, it's 100 times more powerful than morphine. It's 50 times more powerful than heroin.
You can die the first time you try it, right?
And the first time that you try it, it could be your life. And I just talked to somebody today that they knew somebody very close to them that lost their son. And everybody here knows somebody that has lost a family member. And they didn't have a chance to start out in life. And that's just to make the money.
Right. Jeffrey, tell us.
Tell us again about your family situation and your parents and
Okay.
where you grew up, and then how the drugs started and kind of how it escalated. Because
Okay.
I think that's important for you to think it's,
Yeah. See, I grew up, like I say, in white bread America. I mean, I had everything that I needed. My father wasn't wealthy,
Yep.
but we had everything that we needed. And as I wrote on the cover of my book, like my father was the coach, and my brother was the pitcher. I was the catcher, and we actually won the baseball league one year. Came in first place. And we had we had a wonderful life. We lived in front of a park, and I could see the country club from our home. We had a picture window. We call it the picture window because it was so beautiful. You could look out and you could see the park, and I had a great life. I was in the Cub Scouts.
Where was that, Mike, if I may?
I was in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin?
Yeah. And so, I mean, it was a great life. I mean, through the Cub Scouts, and but then when I became 14, came the big thing, which happens to so many families. Happens today far too often. My parents got divorced, and I was 14 years old. And so my father and I left, and it took, and it happens to to most kids, if you have a full family, it's like pulling the rug out from underneath you. Suddenly you don't know who you are anymore.
Yep.
You had stability, you had an identity, you knew who you were. I lived in this house. I went to school, I knew all my friends, we played baseball every day, rode our bikes back then, and sports were done outside back then, and that's all we did every day. We'd get on our bikes, we'd ride somewhere, we'd play sports, and then we'd come home, we'd do our homework, and then we'd go to school. And when the winter came, we'd go ice skating together, and then we'd ice skate, and we'd play pom-pom on the ice. When we got to school, we'd have tetherball. The girls would be off on the swings doing their thing. And of course, back then, they never got their dresses dirty. But the guys were on the swings, going as high as they could. And you could see like the bar and the swings bowing as we're going around, you know, and you think that the swings are actually going to break. And that's what we did, you know, and the girls were playing hopscotch, and it was a wonderful life. But when it took the family away, it took everything. I still didn't know who I was. So when my parents broke up, I went to live with my father, and we moved close to school. And some of them in a neighborhood near school. We lived in a rural area, and so the problem was you know, I just didn't have an identity anymore. So I started walking around the neighborhood, and I found a pool hall. And it wasn't long before I was doing drugs. And there my life had changed, and within a year I still am, I guess I have a lot of the feelings of a hippie of love. I'm glad that I met the Lord, because He's love, and that's probably the main thing that stuck with it. The problem that we had in our generation was drugs. If we could have kept the drugs out, we might have been able to actually do more for changing the country. But that's a huge problem in the United States now. Now that they legalized marijuana, and the kids just don't understand that it's going to be affecting their lives. And they really should publicize just actually how bad it is for say, teenagers.
Yeah.
Yes,
They've
they
actually
should.
proven now that marijuana, if it's done during the teenage years, it will affect the development of the brain. And the child won't develop properly. And as far as drugs are concerned, like I say, there's nothing good that has ever come from it. I was able to complete my years of college, and I got a college degree. But before that happened in the military was when I had my first experience with heroin. And that's basically marijuana is a drug. What do you call that?
Entrance.
Yeah, it's an entrance drug. And once I did marijuana, I remember the first time that I did something different. And I went over to a friend's house, and he was inhaling the aerosol from a can and almost passing out. And I tried it once, and I almost blacked out. I said, hey, that's it.
Yeah.
That's enough for me. That's not the drug that I want to be involved with. But the thing was I stepped over the line there. I actually started experimenting with other drugs. And then when I entered the military was when I did my first heroin.
In the military.
It was in the military,
Thought
yeah.
it would be harder to do in the military, no?
Well, what happened was you know, I met somebody that was in the military, and he had been over in Germany, and he told me about how much hashish was over in Germany, and of course marijuana being the thing that I was doing, and that basically was everywhere I went. We smoked pot. I thought, well, that's where I want to go. So I went to Germany, and it was 1/10 the price. So when I got there, I got in the room, and my buddies were seated around the table, and they were to be my roomies. And I had never thought of trying heroin before. But when I got there, I asked them, I says, hey, how about giving me some of that hash that I heard so much about? And they said, whoa, wait a second here. We don't know you. You could be CID.
Yeah.
Now, CID in the military is like the FBI. So they thought I could be CID. He says, well, we don't trust you. But there's only one way that we'll trust you, and that's if you shoot up some heroin in front of us, or if we allow us to inject you with some heroin. And I said, hey, look, I see a needle, I'm going to pass out. I mean, that's the way I was. When I was 12 years old, I had to have smelling salts because the first shot I was going to get, I just couldn't imagine the needle piercing my skin, and I had to have smelling salts. I mean, that's honestly the way I felt about needles before this happened. So I agreed only after we went back for about a half an hour back and forth. I said, look, I can't do this. There's just no way. And they said, tell you what we're going to do. We'll make it easy for you. See that curtain there? Just stick your arm through a curtain, through this curtain here, turn your back, and we'll make it painless. You won't feel a thing, and then we'll know that you're okay. And of course, I was just 18 at this time.
Yeah, no.
And I didn't have, patience wasn't one of the words, you know, that you have at that age.
No.
So I said, well, you know, I'll tell you what, okay, I'll do it. So I did it. I almost brought a tear in my eye. And that was the greatest mistake I ever made. The greatest thing that I ever did, the greatest thing that's in my book, was when I gave my heart to God.
Amen. Amen.
And that was after this, after the military.
Hey,
But I didn't know about
Jeffrey, tell us some of the experiences you went through, like going out in the streets, dealing with drug dealers and some of that stuff, just how messy. You can't, the time doesn't permit you to share everything in the book, but some of the really ugly things that went on
Oh my God.
because of the addiction.
Well, see, the thing is, there's one thing that they don't tell you. Like, say, if you're thinking about gangs and joining gangs and getting involved with that, someday somebody's going to ask you to go shoot somebody, and they're going to tell you you have to do it. If you don't do it, you're dead. And if you don't do it, they put you in. They have some sort of court on you. And one of the worst times that I had was when I'd been getting high all weekend, actually for about 24 hours on crack. And this is where I was almost killed. Because, you know, cocaine is one drug which you think it's a life-changing drug. You think that when you do it, it's going to change who you are. And I'm kind of a social introvert. And so I thought that it would help me open up and maybe get in the mainstream of life. And that's why I kept on doing it. But I found that wherever I was, whenever the drug came down, I become who I was originally. It never changed me. And it never was, that's what I'm saying, is drugs is never any good. So what happened was I was acting a little bit strange around this guy. And at the end of the night, he says, hey, come with us. And I really wanted to leave because I was out of money. I know what the heck, but of course, I was an addict, and I thought, well, maybe I'm going to get some more drugs there. So I went, they took me to a house, and there was, say, about 10 people seated around a table. And they were trying to talk to me, but I was so messed up on the drug that I couldn't talk. Yet I was in a very dangerous situation because these guys were wondering, who is this guy? And then I heard one of the guys say, hey, you got that 45 or that 38? And of course, you know, I'd been getting high for about a day and a half. And I knew they're talking about a gun, so they were thinking about, hey, this guy's strange. We got to get rid of this guy. And I still couldn't talk. And then, as we sat down at the table, this big guy sat down next to me. I mean, this guy was big. I mean, his hands were like huge. And his shirt was off. He had a scar running down his side. You could see he had some bullet marks in it.
Wow.
And the guy sat down right next to me, and right in front of me, he took his hands and he put them in front of me. And he said, you know, I could just, like he was almost like he could just strangle me right there.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it might have been the fact that I didn't show any fear. I guess at that point, I didn't care.
Wow.
I just didn't care about my life anymore. I couldn't keep doing this over and over and over again. Every month, I'd run out of money. Every month, at the beginning of the month, I'd lose all the money that I had, and I had nothing in the cabinets. And I was lucky to get out of there, out of that place, because somehow they let me go. They took me back to my car, we drove back to the place where we were at, and they let me go. But I could have died there. And by some miracle, I didn't.
You know, Jeffrey, tell us what went on, because you had decades of this addiction and
Yeah.
in and out and mess and
Yeah.
getting a job, losing, like you say, you get some things of a car, and the next thing you wouldn't have a car because of
That's just it.
Yeah.
That was the next thing that I thought I was going to say.
yeah.
Was one of the hardest things to deal with. And this is how hard it is. That's the reason why I wrote the book. I want everybody to know how hard it is to try drugs.
Yep.
And you got to stay away from it, because a certain percentage of people have a problem. And either you're environmentally or you are genetically predisposed to have a problem with it. And this caused me so much horror in my life. One of the worst things was chemotherapy. I had hepatitis C, so I had to be on chemotherapy for 11 months. It was 11 months of injecting myself. I had to inject myself in my abdomen 3 times a week and take these huge pills. And it lasted for 11 months. And I was in such darkness for that 11 months. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of the sorrow, of the horror of trying drugs. That's why I'm here. I want to warn everybody, especially the young, don't try it, because there's a problem in our human makeup. They did an experiment with laboratory rats. What they did was they gave the rat a cage, and they gave it food and water and heroin. But initially they didn't give it the heroin. They gave it just the food and water, and it lived a normal life. But then as soon as they put in the heroin, it did the heroin little by little until it died. And we have the same condition in us. It's like cigarettes. You see people try nicotine, and you see them sticking a cigarette in your throat with a hole in their throat because they had throat cancer.
That's right.
And they're puffing on a cigarette through a hole in their throat because they can't stop. And we have the same condition. And that's a human, unfortunately, it's a human frailty that we have. And it happens to people every single day. And your drug of choice catches you unaware. You have no idea. When I did the heroin that time, I had no idea of how that felt. But it felt so good that it took care of all the ills of life. And it's all I could think about after that. And to this very day, I'm still an addict. I still remember it. It gets indelibly written in your pleasure and your emotional centers of the brain, and that's it. For life, you are forever altered. And that's why I say, don't try it.
Now, much of what you have to say is in the book, and people can read it.
Yeah.
But tell the group here, because we want it for the sake of time when people tune in or watch the video.
Yeah.
They'll only stay with us so long. So
Yeah.
tell us about how the experience that led up to you losing your arm.
Oh, that was horrible.
Yeah.
That was really horrible. Well, I had cooperated with the police, and I was facing 50 years. And I had done some really dumb things, but these weren't really horrible things. I didn't hurt anybody, and I'm not trying to justify it, but what I did was I had written a bunch of checks, and then I had somebody sign one, and then they went to the bank and they cashed it, and I called it a stolen check. Well, then they had me for forgery and fraud, and each one of those is 10 years. Then they had me for issuance of a worthless check. I had about 20 checks. There's 20 checks there. And then they found me with heroin, too. So I was facing 50 years. So they gave me a deal. He says, I'll tell you what, you cooperate with us and we'll take care of the charges. And I didn't want to lose my job. I had a college degree. I was making $40,000 a year fixing CAT scanners. So I had a great job, and I still wasn't happy. And I still went back to it, though. Even though I had everything that you could have, I still went back to it. Why? Because I put it in my emotional and pleasure centers of my brain when I was 18 years old, and I can't forget it. That's why you can't try it. It's suicide to try it. And some people, because of their environment or genetically, if you have a lot of alcoholics in your family tree, the chances are that you're not going to be able to stop. And when I lost my arm, they had found out that I had cooperated. And I didn't know what happened to me, and the truth is it was so traumatic that when they did this to me, I don't remember up to 2 weeks prior to that time. I can't remember where I was. I don't know who did it, but somebody took me and they beat me to death. And they gave me a pure shot of heroin. And it was enough to knock me out for 2 days. I was in the back of my car. They laid me across the back seat. And I laid there for 48 hours. It was 100 degrees outside. It was July 3rd and July 4th. This is in Wisconsin, yet it does reach 100 degrees there, especially around that time of year. So inside the car, it reached 150 degrees. The window, rear window has a prism, and the sun coming through the window actually cooked the back of my neck. It had to be replaced. I got a skin graft on the back of my neck. When they found me after 2 days, I was out for 2 days. I did wake up twice during that time. And the one time that I recall waking up, somebody had knocked on my window and asked me if I was okay. I thought I was in my driveway at home, and I was supposed to move my car. And I said, oh, I'll move my car in a few minutes, you know, but obviously the person should have seen that there was vomit all over the back of the seat. I was laying there in the hot sun for 2 days, so they knew that I was almost dead, so they must have been some of my attackers. But the second time that I woke up, I knew I was in trouble. I knew that if I didn't get out of there, I was going to die. But I couldn't lift myself up off the seat because I'd laid on the arm for 2 days, and the circulation was cut off, and they had to remove the limb for that reason. But when they found me, I was swollen. My kidneys had stopped functioning. I had to, after they found me, they brought me into the hospital. They had to put me on dialysis for a month, and then my kidneys began working again. Oh, thank God. Thank you, God.
Wow.
But I should have died from the beating. I should have died from the heroin that kept me out for 2 days. I should have died from the sun, from the heat in the car. I mean, you see it all the time where dogs die, children die if you're in the car. But I was in the back of that car for 2 days. And like I say, it probably reached astronomical temperatures in the car. And I should have died. But God let me live.
For a reason.
And I think the reason why is so I could finish this book. And as I wrote on the cover, I've got 50 years of experience. I know what happens. I have so many horrific things in here that describe some things that happened to me through my trail of self-induced torment.
Tell us about, because we just have a couple of minutes to keep a certain time frame on the
Okay.
video.
Yeah.
But tell us about how you came to Christ and how Jesus
That's great.
has
Amen.
brought you to where you are now.
That was beautiful. This is after the military, and I, of course, was in the inner core, living in a place, spending my money on drugs, and I was even selling some marijuana. And a couple of people, I remember it was Dave and Mary, was their names. And they knocked on my door. I was playing my guitar. They knocked on my door, and they showed me some things in the scripture. They showed me what they call the Roman road. And it's about being born again. Things that I never knew existed, that are in the Bible. I was confirmed. I actually went to church and I was confirmed, but I don't remember any of those things. As usually we don't. And that's why it's really good to open up the Bible and maybe read John.
Yeah.
John is the one that said Jesus. He slept on Jesus' breast, and he's the disciple that Jesus loved, and he loved Jesus so much. That's the Bible. That's the Gospel on John, which is called generally the Gospel of Love. Anyway, they stopped by and they showed me what I didn't know about the Bible. Right at that point, I took all my drugs. I don't know, the neighborhood must have got high. Because I threw it all of my drugs down the incinerator, and then began walking for God. And it was the happiest time in my life. It's like I went up in a balloon and I stayed up there for a couple of years. But then I made the mistake of thinking that I could re-enter that environment. And I went back and I had a friend that I thought I could introduce to the Lord. And devil is so evil.
Yep.
God, the first night that I was there, heroin was coming to the house. Right at that point. And I thought, hey, it's been a year and a half. I've got most of my schooling done. Just about got my degree. I got one semester to go. Great. I'm in charge of my life. And I did it. And that's when I ended up with 50 years. It took about a month. And actually longer than that. I think I remember it was about 3 months. 3 months time, I had all those charges. And then and that was the first time. The second time that I was supposed to be murdered, that was the second time. That was the first time that I cooperated with the police. And I got away with it that time. But the thing is, my brother was involved in drugs, and he told the people about it.
Oh, boy.
And I went ahead with it anyway.
Oh.
So here's another impact of drugs. For the rest of my time in that city, I could never go to Summerfest. I could never go out in public, because a couple of times when I did, I ran into these guys. And one time they pulled up next to me, they had a club, and they rapped on the window and they looked at me. Luckily it was during the day, and I was going to school then, and they probably would have killed me right there. But I could never, my freedom was lost.
Right.
Can you imagine the impact on somebody that's 22 years old and you can't go out in public? You gotta hide in your house. This is just the beginning of the things that happen if you subject yourself.
So
Drugs.
so you came to the Lord,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
like many people do,
Yeah,
they have a stronghold and they think, I can be around it, and that's a big lie.
yeah.
And you end up back really giving a lot of years back to drugs and losing your arm because of this, and
Yeah.
of course other devastation. But what's keeping you sober now? What's keeping you away from drugs today?
To be perfectly honest, it's the fact that, and this is why I say don't ever try it. I got too old. I just got too old.
Yeah.
I was doing it up to 4 years ago.
Wow.
And I got to the point where I could no longer rebuild my life. That's what it was. It was a constant, and you build your life and you get it, and then you think you're strong enough, and then you go back to it. That's why I'm saying, now the people that are out there begging, and you see them out there in the street corners, I meet these guys all the time. That's actually how I paid for my book, is I panhandled to pay for to pay in order to publish it, and it keeps my car running. And that.
See, if I see somebody out on the exit to a freeway or something, and they're not holding up something for food or need such and such, but if they say need money to publish my book,
Yeah.
I would probably give something to them, because it's a much more worthy cause.
It is, but see, and I know and I honestly know these people. I know them, and I'll tell you that 99 out of 100 are using either methamphetamine
Right.
Yeah.
That's
or
true.
heroin.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've been out there. I know.
Yeah.
Very true.
Every single one, except for a couple, are actually using it for that. And that's why they're out there. And that's the hopelessness of their life,
Yeah.
Right.
and they're no longer using it in order to enjoy it. You don't enjoy it past the first few times. And then from then on, you're only taking it so you're not sick. And that's why they're out there.
Right.
A lot of them are vets.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of vets too.
Yeah.
And I'm a
There's a lot
vet.
of vets
Yeah.
out there that are.
Yeah.
Can we take a couple questions, if anybody has questions?
Yeah.
Diane has a question.
Did you ever do LSD?
Yes.
Because
Yes, I
I
did.
lost a brother because of that.
Okay, that, believe it or not, they've actually found out that that's why you shouldn't do LSD. For one thing, the drugs that they have today now are so mixed up with so many different chemicals that back then,
It's pure.
back in the 60s, it was actually pure.
Yeah.
But it's not like that anymore. And they say that, and actually it happened to me. I worked in electronics. Whenever I looked at a schematic, the lines were always wavy.
Oh, boy.
It had a permanent effect on my vision. And that's what LSD does. Once again, there is no good that comes from drug use. It will impact you your entire life. Yeah.
How long has it been since you lost your arm?
32 years.
Wow.
32 years. And let me tell you, I suffer. I suffer every day. You can't imagine what it's like walking out in the world with one hand tied behind your back. Believe me. And I suffer every day, but God gives me the strength to go on. And He gave me the strength to write a book, which and I'm so lucky to have my cognizance and half of mine left. You know, I'm very lucky. You know, I believe it's all God. It's all God's work. The only reason why I'm alive today, and the only reason why I have any semblance of intelligence is because God wants me to reach the people today that are thinking of using drugs.
How can people find out how to get your book?
Well, you can you just basically just Google "I Give My Right Arm" and then my name, Jeffrey Dale Wapp, and then a book will come up. And you can buy it from Kindle or eBay or Barnes & Noble. And the one that actually who published it is Author House. Now, if the book is purchased from them, I get a couple dollars. But eBay actually doesn't, I don't get any money from eBay, or if it do, it might be like 50 cents or something. You know, so I'm not really making any money on the book. Now, I sell it for $15 because I buy it for $15. I'm not interested in money. That doesn't matter to me at all. You know, I do need it, you know, for like to keep my car running and to get around and talk to people. That's all I care about. That's all that's on my heart. And I know that God has placed this burden on me. I believe He did. And it's in my heart. I just want to reach the young and teach them about the perils if they decide to try it.
Yeah.
The devastation that they'll go through in their life.
It's too bad you can't speak at the schools where it's regulated, right?
I'd love to speak at schools, but then you're dealing with the city
Yeah,
and bureaucracy
is
and
right.
things like that. But I tried. Believe it or not, that's the reason why I wrote the book. I started out wanting to get to, wanting to talk to schools. So I started writing. And after I wrote about 40 pages, I went, hey, you know, I think I might have a talent. I don't know. I found one talent. Thank you, Lord. I could never play the guitar. I can play music, but I'd have to have sheet music in front of me. And some people can play by ear. I can't. I had no talent except for that. And I found I just kept writing, and eventually I says, you know, I'm going to make it a book. And then I did, and it actually took. I put, if you want to say full time, I say I put 4 years.
Wow.
Myself into it. And you know, I must have went over it 1,000 times. Either you're a total buffoon or it's going to get better.
Yeah.
I am sort of a half buffoon, so it's pretty good. So yeah.
After your parents got divorced, did you have a good relationship with your mom still, or your dad?
With my mother I did, but my father never. He even after when I started writing the book, I says, geez, Dad, I'm writing this book, and I says, can you got anything to say? He says, no, I can't change.
So even when you lived with him,
He never.
wasn't.
He never had a single conversation with me.
And then your
Ever.
mom, though even though you lived with your dad, you still had a good.
I had a relationship with my mother. My mother was the main cause of the breakup, but of course my father wasn't. You can tell by the fact that he never talked to his kids that it must have been difficult for her in the marriage. And that's the way my father was. He had a lot of problems. I mean, he came here to Las Vegas, and a woman was taking advantage of him. When he died, he had $3,500 a month he was getting from pensions, but this woman was cheating him out of the money. And I tried to stop him, but I couldn't. And eventually he died of malnourishment because he gave all his money to this woman. And I came to live with him, and I tried to help him, and I couldn't.
Wow.
So that was my father. My father had a tremendous amount of problems socially, but he never had a single conversation with me when I was young, or he was the coach of our team, but he didn't talk to us. And back then, there was like a saying back then, kids are seen and not heard.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are my age can remember that parents, in some cases, they didn't have much to do with speaking with their children. It was more or less, you stayed in your group, you went places, you stayed with the kids, parents stayed with themselves, they did their thing, you did your thing. And we just didn't really talk. And even as an adult, I still tried to talk to him, and it's just the way it was. I could never break down that barrier. And I could have used oh gosh, I would have given anything to have a father to talk to me about things that are on my mind.
And where's your brother?
We all do. We all need our parents.
Where's your brother now?
My brother's an alcoholic, and he's in. I hope he wouldn't see this, but he's in Wisconsin, and he's 1 year older than I am. But he's an alcoholic. So there in my tree, my mother was an alcoholic. My father had problems with it. My grandfather did. My other grandfather did, and so there in my family tree, I was predisposed.
Right.
Genetically, I was a goner. The second that I tried heroin, I was a goner. And that's the risk that people take. And you just don't know. And you see them wherever you go, when you see them walk up to you in a parking lot, you see them on the street corners, every one of them say the same thing when I talk to them. What do they say? They say, I wish I never would have did it. I wish I never would have tried it.
You can't get out.
Yeah.
Because they can't stop. And that's the truth, and that's the warning.
And Zena, did you have a question?
That's why it's so important that to
High
bring
school.
this to schools.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know, it's not
Yeah.
just high school now, they're getting younger,
Yeah.
elementary,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
middle school,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
really need this information.
And as I was saying before, one of the things is, remember the 49,000 between the ages of 18 and 24 died last year. Almost 50,000. That's 10,000 more than died in fatal car crashes. That's 9,000 more that died of breast cancer. That's the epidemic in this country. There's a real epidemic. And it should be on the front page of every newspaper in the country. What's happening to our youth?
People in that age group don't die of breast cancer, do they?
No.
Oh, no,
Well,
no.
it's older ladies.
Right, yeah, so their statistics are even
Car
worse.
crashes, anybody.
But even so, getting the news out
Yeah.
Right.
while they are young,
Right.
Yes.
part of their,
Exactly.
Absolutely,
Well,
absolutely.
There's a program called DARE.
That's right.
Yeah,
They-
there.
There's a
Okay.
DARE program.
that's.
And
for the police.
I haven't heard nothing about it lately at
Oh.
They're
all.
all taking transgender studies.
True.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started
Well,
with
it's
that.
high
Don't
school.
get me.
The liberals, they're taking over the schools.
But that's the truth. That's the honest, that's straight from someone who's got the experience.
Yeah.
And I pray with all my heart that the youth will listen to this message
Yeah.
and realize that they can become a statistic. That before they even get started, they can lose their life.
That's right. Let's just stop the camera there just for now.